Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Tracy Show, the show that interviews third party candidates running for office. My name is, of course, Tracy, and I am joined today by Eric Parker, who is running for Jackson City Council in District 2 in the state of Florida. And before we get started with our interview, I want to definitely invite everybody to like this video. Please like this video. Our likes have been kind of sliding off for the past couple of weeks. And I want to get those back up to where I think they should be. So please like this video. Share this video to your friends, your family, your enemies, your co-workers. Put it on all your social media platforms. Please subscribe to my channel. I am 14 away from 100 subscribers. I've been stuck at 86 for the past month and a half, so I need your help to get me over that 100. There should be a red box somewhere in your corners that says subscribe. I would greatly appreciate that. So we're going to pay some bills and we'll get to our interview here in just a moment. I also want to invite you to register for my monthly Zoom calls. They take place each third Saturday at 11 a.m. and that's Eastern Standard Time. You can register by going to tracymediallc.com/r-events. Join us in our campaign to raise $100,000 for equipment and our scripted series. You can go to tracymediallc.com to learn about that. Here is the link to subscribe to this channel. That is a short link, but of course you'll see a subscribe link in there somewhere in the YouTube section. You'll see it. Please support us on Patreon. I'm still looking for that elusive 6 Patreon. I'm still stuck at 5. And if you so choose, you can always cash at me at $TracyMedia74. So, Eric, after all of those long-winded commercials, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I am doing great. I'm so glad you joined me and taking time out of your schedule to kind of talk about what it is that you've been up to in terms of running for office. So I gave kind of a background about what office you were running in and what state. But since you're my first libertarian that has been on, I'm going to ask a whole lot of questions about what it is that the libertarians stand for and how you're going to use that in office. But my first question is, and it's always I ask this question of every candidate that comes on, is why is it that you want to run for city council in the district that you're running in?
So my why is I used to work for a local craft brewery here in Jacksonville. That was that part-time job I mentioned to you backstage earlier before the podcast. And during the COVID lockdowns, even here in the state of Florida, with the Republican government here, they still locked our state down for nearly 90 days, which really hurt small businesses. And that brewery that I worked at nearly went out of business. They were a week away from closing their doors. It was a small family-owned establishment, had only been open. I think they just had their 4-year anniversary. So they had only been open for like 2 years or so. Well, they were forced to get a restaurant license to reopen. They were forced to purchase a hot dog roller and serve food to pretend like they were a restaurant to reopen. And they were able to reopen by the skin of their teeth. And then our local Jacksonville City Council came out and passed an ordinance fining small businesses $500 if they had 50 or more people on the property. So that's whenever I went to a city council meeting for the first time, because I wanted to speak up against that. If you look at our founding fathers, there's a lot of historical importance in pubs and breweries. That's a lot of where the conversations about politics were had, and just like a sense of community in those establishments. That was a part of my speech, but also I wanted to speak up about just hurting small businesses after a lot of them already just closed their doors. So, and then at that same city council meeting, they were voting to give the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars over $100 million for a project to build an entertainment district downtown. So I was just like looking at this, like, wait a minute, you're gonna at one point pass an ordinance to fine small businesses for having a what I would consider a successful day at the brewery, but you want to give away taxpayer dollars to a billionaire, mind you, less, for I guess bailing them out because they're not running a good business. So it just didn't make any sense to me. And from that point moving forward, I went to every single city council meeting for at least 6 months. They have two a month. And I spoke up against corporate welfare because in every single one of them, all I did was look at the marked agenda. I would find the dollar signs, the zeros, and the commas. Then I would go look up the company that was receiving it. And usually it's a well connected developer, a big business, you know what I mean? A large corporation receiving these multi-million-dollar bailouts or tax breaks. Well, while they want to raise the taxes on the people of Jacksonville. So that I started going to city council meetings and speaking up against it. I felt like my voice wasn't being heard. Even, I think at that point I might have still been registered Republican. And we have a Republican supermajority, but none of them wanted to listen to the people of Jacksonville about their out of control spending and ending corporate welfare because, as you and I both know, that's who funds their elections and their reelections. So I changed my party affiliation to Libertarian, started getting involved with the local Libertarian Party, and decided that it was best if someone that I knew would listen to me would also run for office, and I thought that person was the best person for that was me. So District 2 in Jacksonville is the northeast side of Jacksonville, what we call, I know this isn't a local podcast, but Ocean Way and East Arlington, but it's the northeast side of Jacksonville. A little bit more is like around the same time, two other libertarians who have also never ran for office were thinking of getting involved. So in Jacksonville, we have 19 city council seats, 14 districts, and 5 at-large seats. Well, the Libertarian Party is running, they're running someone at District 8 as well as myself in District 2, and one candidate is running for at-large 5. So we have 3 libertarians running for office here in Jacksonville. And around the same time, I've reached out to some people with the local Green Party. It's like, hey, have you guys thought about running some candidates, hopefully in districts that we already don't have? I was kind of doing an exploratory committee there, making sure I wasn't going to run into any other, outside of the 2-party candidates in my race. And they just said, we're not ready yet to start running candidates. We're still getting activated. And I offered like, hey, if y'all need help. And that's where that's the importance of people outside of the 2-party system, even though we don't agree on everything, coming together to help out. So yeah, that was my reason I'm sorry, that was kind of went on a rant there, but that was my reason for deciding to run for city council here in Jacksonville.
Now, why? Because I'm assuming there are several conservative parties, like non-Republican parties. We won't discuss the Democrats because I'm assuming that's not an option for you. But why the Libertarian Party?
So I've always believed in limited government. I don't, and some of the worst atrocities in our American history and world history were caused by our government. And I think that they need to be more restrained and have less power. And I just felt like the Libertarian Party was the only one where that message was consistent. And people will talk about, the poor messaging of the Libertarian Party sometimes, you know what I mean? And or the fact that they're not able to garner enough votes to win elections. But in my opinion, they've always stood for limited government. And that's why I went to the Libertarian Party. And I mean, there are other areas where the constitutionalists are strict constitutionalists, but they lean more conservative. And I mean, me, on certain things, I can seem conservative, you know what I mean? Especially on spending and the growth in government. But I also, probably can find common ground on, criminal justice reform with progressives or the Greens. So, that can all be found in the Libertarian Party.
Now, because I know all of the third party candidates I've had on so far have had to gather signatures just to appear on the
Yeah.
ballot. I'm going to assume that's not the case with you because the libertarians just automatically get on the ballot. Is that correct?
Nope, that is not correct.
Oh,
I
okay.
have
Okay.
I got to get the same amount of signatures as my Republican opponents.
Okay, so you all
So
do signatures. Okay. How
yeah.
many signatures do you have to gather?
So it is 1% of the registered voters within my district. That number just got updated and it's also got changed. So we had a redistricting committee hearings earlier in the year, and it was on the news actually recently. If you look up where the NAACP and the ACLU sued about racial gerrymandering that's happened in Jacksonville, and it is happening in districts 7, 8, 9, and 10. Now, I spoke up against those district lines, but for different reasons, because my district is the only one that crosses the St. Johns River, which is the largest body of water in Jacksonville. That was in their own rules not to cross it, but they broke their own rules so that they could put an establishment Republican candidate in my race. So I spoke up against it 4 times. They didn't listen. They got sued. Now they haven't, before the election, to come up with new district lines. But I've been told like all this really is if the city council loses that lawsuit, they'll just end up paying money. Nothing's going to change with the district lines. So I'm like, well, at least the message was sent. It wasn't even my message, but a message was sent to the establishment. Now, the signatures that I need for my district, because of the district lines being still undecided, they are allowing us to do it with an average of all 14 districts divided by, so all of Jacksonville divided by 14 and 1% of that. And I think the number is like 477 signatures. Now, the good news is I've got over that number. That number can go up, and I haven't looked to see because it would have been the 11th of this month, would have been the final number of registered voters in Jacksonville divided by 14 and then 1% of that. So, and I think it is going to end up being around less than 500. And I'm really close. I'm over the original number, but it might go up. So I'm over 477 or whatever, but it could go up, and I got to get a few more, which is no big deal. I have until December to finish that out. So
Okay, and because I thought your campaign ended on in November 8th, when is the overall election?
So qualifying for us, we have our signatures in December. We qualify in January. The primary election is in March. And then we have an open unitary primary where people can vote outside of party lines. And then the top two make it to the general election. And the general election is in May. Now, in my race, I'm running against 3 Republican candidates. So you have me and you have 3 Republicans. And I hope they don't hear this, but my hope is that they split the Republican vote, me getting a few of them that I know and my message appeals to them. But then I get everyone else, and it's enough to get me to the general election. And then in the general election, I have to just win 50% plus 1 of the people in my district. So that's my strategy. I'm hoping the Republicans split the Republican vote, and it allows me to get to the general election.
Now, I hate to use the word assumption. So, pardon me. Obviously, your campaign, you're gathering signatures and talking about your campaign to, whomever it is in your district that you're speaking to. Well, I'll ask the first part of the question. Do you use volunteers to do that, or are you a one-person operation?
So I've had some volunteers help out, but most of the time it's one-person operation.
Okay.
There's a few libertarians. There's not a lot of libertarians that are registered libertarians in Jacksonville. Less than 3,000 that are registered in the party probably. But there are libertarian-leaning Republicans and Democrats, or just people fed up with the duopoly and the two major parties, and some of them have come out and helped me door knock. They've went to campaign events. I haven't started sign waving yet. It's a little early for that, but I'm hoping to have people at sign waving. I've been invited to speaking engagements with different organizations around Jacksonville. So people are used to seeing me, at least people that are, I guess, politically involved are used to seeing me around. But it's been a lot of me with the exception of a few volunteers and helpers here and there.
So you talked about there's 3 Republicans running for the same office as yourself in the same district.
Yes.
Okay, so your next question. Are there, and you may not know this, but I'll ask it anyway, are there any Democrats running for the same office? Or is it just all 3 Republicans?
There are currently no Democrats running in my district. Now, that doesn't mean that someone can jump in the race last minute or change their party affiliation at the last minute. Which that last part I didn't think about till now, but that could totally be an option. Now, I have heard from people within the Democrat Party that they don't plan on running a Democrat in my district, only because I live in a very rural district in Jacksonville. The last time our current councilman ran, he beat the Democrat with over 70% of the vote.
So it's a Republican leaning district. Okay, yeah, now I'm understanding.
Yeah. At least what's funny is like the number of registered voters is pretty close, but the people that show up and vote in local elections lean very Republican. And that's where like I'm hoping having a third party candidate getting out and knocking on doors. Like right now I'm knocking on all non-Republicans that I consider super voters. But I'm hoping that to remind them, hey, look, local elections matter and your voice matters and you can make a real difference in this election when it comes up. So just be mindful and march that local decisions made at the local level matter. So
absolutely they do. Usually at this point I always talk about raising money and the need to raise money and how you raise money. Oh, looks like we got a comment coming in. Absolutely it does. Yeah. Absolutely. So are you fundraising now, or are you putting that? I'm just gonna go ahead and assume you're fundraising now. I'm just gonna say I'm just figuring it, but I might be wrong.
I'm fundraising, and if anyone here wants to help me beat 3 Republicans, you can go to ericparkerforjax.com, and the donate tab is up in the top right corner of the page. I've raised a little over $6,000. It's not a lot because I've been filed for over a year, but you know, what I do is I raise the money that I need, like for yard signs, and I go buy them, and I got plenty of yard signs, and I got plenty of postcards to give out. I have T-shirts that I'll sell or give to volunteers. I have hats that I'll sell and give to volunteers. But I'm trying to really run a grassroots campaign. Now, my opponents have already gotten raised way more money than I have, but they're all within the Republican Party as well. They run in those circles. One of them is a lawyer, and he's ran for office before. Another is, and he's part like the establishment guy. Another is like not establishment, but he's more like the MAGA crowd. He's also got his own private business, and he's a millionaire. He self-funded a lot of his campaign. Another one is the current Soil and Water, and so she's politically involved. And so even though may not be establishment, she still has political connections. So I'm the guy jumping in the race with no real political connections, but I think I'm doing pretty good for what I need for my race. Now, more money is always helpful and it's welcome. And you know, if you shoot me a message and especially if you live close to or in Jacksonville, and you see this, please reach out. So
on the fundraising question, who is it that you wouldn't accept money from?
So probably political action committees unless they are one that is very liberty minded. But I don't even know of a political action. Like, I've thought about starting my own political action committee, and then I just think about dark money in politics, and it's like, no, that would be like counterintuitive to my beliefs. You know what I mean? But I would only raise money for liberty minded, independent, third party candidates. So there aren't any of those out there. That's the thing, is I probably wouldn't take any money from any political action committees. I wouldn't take any money from special interests unless they are like small business focused. And even then, like, if I met a person, because so I could get $1,000 from each person, but that could be $1,000 from them, and $1,000 from their business, and $1,000 from their spouse or whatever. Like, if I met them and it was on a personal level and they wanted to, write that check, and I knew, if they knew they're not purchasing political privilege, like, look, just because you give me this money doesn't mean when I get in city council, I'm going to vote the way you want. Now, I'll explain why I vote the way I do, and you should expect for me to vote the way that I end up voting before you end up supporting me anyways, which is limited government. I'm not going to raise taxes. I'm going to vote no on every single corporate welfare bill. You know what I mean? Like, so just expect that. So if they're looking for special favors, then I'm not going to take their money.
Okay, so follow-up question on that. When you're out door to door, or, well, no, I'm going to rephrase this question. So we talked backstage about me being more of a socialist than a libertarian, and how I tend to lean, because I tend to lean left. If the audience watching hasn't kind of picked up on that, I tend to lean left, and that's okay. I've enjoyed my conversations with candidates that don't necessarily lean the way I do. But if I lived in Jacksonville and you came knocking at my door, what would you say to me as someone who considers themselves a socialist to convince
So
me to vote for you?
I do. I have a list of the people that I'm knocking on their doors. That I usually know their political party before I knock on their door. It depends, not always, but if it says Democrat, or there aren't very many in the Progressive Party or Socialist Party here in Florida. I mean, they're probably out there, and I'll eventually, if they vote, I'm going to end up knocking on their door. But I would just, I start with my number one goal is to end corporate welfare in Jacksonville. I want to quit taking our tax dollars away from everyone in Jacksonville and giving it to the special interests in Jacksonville. That's why I'm running. So at the top of my card. Also, we can build bridges around the criminal justice reform. One of the first bills that I'm going to author is going to be to decriminalize marijuana at the local level. And I've already spoken with a guy who's a progressive Democrat, and if he gets in, he says that's something we're going to work on together. You know what I mean? Like, we might not work on raising taxes. I don't know if that's even how you feel, if that's what you feel we need to do, but we might disagree there. But there are things that we can work on. So ending corporate welfare, decriminalizing marijuana, in my opinion, also decriminalizing psilocybin. But let's start with marijuana. Let's start with just one bill at a time and get it passed. So that's number one. I think that's somewhere where I think I would be able to win you over. Affordable housing, but my way of getting to affordable housing might be different. I would like to deregulate some of the zoning in some of the more populated areas in Jacksonville, so you can have multi-use residential properties, and then that would help out with the supply and demand. But definitely, getting rid of some of the fees for small businesses and startups, and deregulating a lot of the occupational licensing for small businesses in Jacksonville. It's an extra like $250 a year if you want to have a food cart downtown as opposed to outside of Jacksonville. I want to get rid of that. You know what I mean? So that way, entrepreneurs, people just trying to get started, they can go have a food cart or a hot dog cart downtown and save them some money. So those are areas where I think that I could appeal to the Democrats or left leaning or progressives or the Green parties. Um, but I'm also willing to listen to other perspectives and ideas. And if they align with limiting the power of government, I might be down with it.
So the next set of questions are about your opponents. And I've also asked this question of everybody who I've had on, and I know your answer will be as candid as possible. Um, First question about your opponents is what differentiates you from them?
So, me not being purchased or bought by special interest. And I can't, one of my opponents is an establishment Republican. He's been very involved with the Republican Party. He's ran for office unsuccessfully before. He's an attorney here in Jacksonville. He speaks on conservative radio stations as their like legal counsel for like political legal counsel, I guess. So in my opinion, he's beholden to the interests of downtown Jacksonville and the special interest in Jacksonville. Uh, Another one of my opponents owns a electrical contracting company. Now he's a nice guy. I'm not going to talk bad about his business, but he does get government contracts for that business. And I'm not saying that he's running for office, hopefully to get more government contracts, but I know I don't own an electrical company that gets government contracts. And then the other I have heard is involved with what you would say the downtown authority as well and has other special interests. Now, not necessarily establishment, but that's I don't have any of those special interests. I mean, you could probably go look at their fundraising and see the people that have given to their campaigns, and then that give you a better idea of who really owns their vote.
So the next question is what values do you have that are similar to your three opponents?
I can't speak for all three of my opponents. One of my opponents, he at least shows up to a lot of events, and I've seen him out in the community. So I would say like, and he's the guy I talked about with his electrical contracting company. So he's showing up to the events and he's door knocking and he's running in a grassroots campaign, and he is mostly self funding with donations here or there. He's the non-establishment choice. If you ask me, he's more conservative than I guess one of the other opponents. So there is that.
Welcome, Parker. Thank you for joining us. I keep saying that. I always ask this question, but since I always ask every candidate, there's a whole lot of questions you're going to get like this. What have you personally given up to run for office?
So that part-time job that I had at the local craft brewery, I didn't have to quit it, but in order to run a real campaign, I needed the time and the energy to be able to do so. So I quit that job. As much as I am passionate about the local craft beer industry, and really cared about the brewery that I was working at, I gave that up. I've obviously given up personal time and personal finances. But I'm making sure to keep my priorities straight. You know what I mean? Making sure that I'm not letting this change me for any reason and make me, I guess, take away from my family time. So.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because just about everyone who I've had on has said, I've had to give up time with children, spouse, et cetera, et cetera. And the impact that it's had on them, that's something that I think that if you're running for office, especially if you're running as a third party candidate, you really need to think about, because you're not going to have, tons of volunteers coming out and always volunteering for you. It's going to be you, maybe your spouse, maybe your children, maybe, your next door neighbor. That's not a question. That's just a statement I wanted to make. But I think something I have never asked before, and maybe I hope I don't. Well, if you don't get the question I'm asking, I can figure out another way to restate this. So, when you first decided to run for office, and you said, I'm going to run as a libertarian, did that make it harder for you, or did that make it easier for you in terms of personally and politically?
So I think strategically it probably hurt because I'm not getting any help from a major party. And like you said, I don't have access to the same level of volunteers, the same level of money. But I also acknowledge that had I ran as a Republican, I wasn't going to be the establishment choice either. So I wouldn't have got the establishment money behind me. Now I've been to conservative. There was a political knob hop is what they called it, and there was a straw poll, and I was at a very conservative event, and I got last in the straw poll. My other three opponents were there, but I did get 17% of the vote at a very conservative straw poll event. So the fact that I was able to pull in 17% of the vote running as a libertarian at a conservative event meant that a lot of people that showed up, my message still resonated with them. Where I think it benefits me is I do have a lot of libertarian ideas and ideals. I've always leaned libertarian, even in the Republican Party. You know, I ran when I first registered to vote as a Republican. This might be the first time I admit this out loud, but I voted for Ron Paul in the primaries in 2008, and then I voted for Obama in the general election. Don't tell anyone. But then that was
You
the
just
last
told
time.
everyone, but that's okay.
Yeah, I know. But that was the last time I ever voted for a major party candidate in a general election, because I felt like I was lied to. I voted for him because I was in the Army Reserves and I was deploying to Iraq, and he ran on ending the war in Iraq, and he didn't. So I never voted for another major party candidate in the general election ever again. I learned my
Yeah.
lesson then.
I'm assuming you're talking about both Rand Paul and Obama, because didn't they both run on that? Or am I just not? Am I just
No,
like, oh, when?
Ron, it was Ron Paul in 08 and 2012, and then Rand Paul in 2016. They all ran on ending the war in Iraq. And that's what I'm saying, though, is I voted for Ron because I was registered Republican. So I voted for Ron Paul in the primaries.
Oh, that's the
And then
father. Okay, never mind.
yeah,
I get them
that was the
confused.
father.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the old man. And whenever he didn't get the Republican nomination, then I voted elsewhere. I did not vote Republican. Let's just, in 2008. Well, in 2012, I voted for Ron Paul again, but instead of voting for one of the two major parties in the general, I voted Libertarian for Gary Johnson. So in 2008 was the last time I ever voted for
So you're the
a.
one that cost Hillary the election. I got
No,
it. Yeah,
it's my fault.
that was it. I'm like,
That was that one vote.
yeah, the one vote of what did Gary Johnson get? Like
Well, for the
4% or
record,
5%?
I don't think she would have ended the war in Iraq either. So she wouldn't have had
Oh
my.
no, clearly. But I'm just saying they're always looking for some excuse. Like, who is she
Yeah,
gonna blame? It's either Jill
yeah.
Stein, who didn't get but 1%, less than 1%, and then Gary Johnson got less than 3%. Like, oh,
Yeah,
okay, who you gonna blame tomorrow? But
exactly.
I
Well,
do. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say if the Democrats wanted to win, they should have picked a better candidate. I think if Bernie Sanders wouldn't have got beat up, he might not have got my vote, but I think he would have had a better chance to win. You know what I mean? So the Democrat
Okay, so
Party.
now we're going to fight because Bernie is my favorite. Like,
Yeah, no, I'm saying
literally my favorite.
I know he would have done better than Hillary Clinton for sure. I seriously believe that. But the DNC, what they did to Bernie is the same thing the Republican Party did to Ron Paul back in 2012. So a lot of people that are now in the Libertarian Party, were just Ron Paul Republicans, and they saw what the Republican Party did. Same thing. Now she's not as popular, but same thing that the Democrat Party did to Tulsi Gabbard after Tulsi Gabbard outed Kamala Harris. You know what I mean? Like in that debate. Like, oh,
Yeah,
you're like,
Tulsi, not one of my favorites. I'm
yeah, I
just
know. I mean, I didn't expect her to be, but that's my point though. Is her, Bernie Sanders, and Ron Paul were all non-establishment, but in the major parties, and now they are blacklisted, blackballed from not Bernie. He's still in, but and Rand Paul is too. But you get my point. Like they were the non-establishment guys, and they didn't get the support. So
yeah, and that happens with both parties. I mean, my guest last week, he talked about, and you talked about, basically, you were in this one. Well, you weren't actually running as a Republican, but he talked about how he ran as a Republican. They basically X'd him out, and he had to run as a third party candidate, and now he's involved with the Independence Party. So it happens on both sides. Well, I
yeah,
keep
it
seeing
does.
both sides, but they're really one because I like to call them the Republicans.
Yeah, we
Because
call them
basically they're the same. It's like they're people say, "Oh, well, the Republicans are heartless and the Democrat." No, they're the same. They take money from the same place. They do this. They have the same policies. What's
yep.
the difference? I don't see it. But I wanted to move on to the next section of my interviews. Interview singular. Is normally I name some issues. Now I know some of the ones I'm going to name we are definitely going to disagree on, but this isn't about me running for office. This is about you running for office. So, and I will try to keep these as localized as possible.
Okay.
So, if once you were elected as a city council person, how would you deal with the issue? And I don't even know if it's an issue in your city, but um, ending qualified immunity. Are you for it or are you against it?
I am for ending qualified immunity. My issue is I don't think there's much I could do at the local level. Now, there are ways where we can localize our police more and have less undue influence from federal and state levels law enforcement. So we've used it. I like to call it the Bill of Rights sanctuary city. And essentially, that would be where any outside agency, state or federal, if they want to use our local, they will not be allowed to use our local resources to infringe on people's civil rights. So, let's use no knock warrants, for example. Um, no knock warrants are outlawed in the state of Florida, but there's a loophole where local law enforcement agencies and state law enforcement agencies get deputized by federal agencies like the ATF, the DEA, or the FBI, and then they're able to perform no knock warrants. So I would outlaw in Jacksonville the use of our local resources by state and federal levels if they're going to infringe on people's civil rights. Now, that doesn't fix qualified immunity, but I think that's because qualified immunity is a state and federal issue. And believe it or not, I don't know how the Progressive Party feels about police unions, but police unions have a lot to do with making sure that qualified immunity laws do not get ended because that's how they get
Absolutely.
infringed.
We're 100% agreement on that. Now, I do want to follow up on something that you said. Um, a sub issue under that is defunding of the police.
Now, I'm not pro defunding the police, but I definitely am pro accountability of law enforcement. And also, I'm pro cutting taxes for, the residents of Jacksonville, which would, in a sense, provide less money to all of government, not just the police. But I'm definitely for accountability and I'm for better use of our money. And I am for the demilitarization of the police. So quit giving them money to be overly of not violent, but
Weaponized.
militarized.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
militarized.
weaponized. Exactly. So there
Hmm.
are areas within the local police budget that we can trim some of the money away for sure. Now, I'm not for completely getting rid of them. If you know the libertarian stance, we would, and you would probably disagree, but what if it was privatized on a local level? What if your neighborhood got to vote and choose who ran their police precinct instead of it being all of Jacksonville? And maybe where you live, it is like that. And we kind of have that too because Jacksonville Beach has its own police force, but JSO, Jacksonville is an incorporated city. So all of Duval County has one police force. And I don't know that that's a good use of resources because the needs in each neighborhood in Jacksonville are different. You know what I mean? So there are ways where we can get some of that money back from them. I don't like, the term defunding, but the optics of that look really bad, especially when I'm running in a very Republican district.
So now we're moving on to the second issue in terms of, and this is it's a question or second issue, is the state of the economy in every place and everyone I've talked to is terrible. People are struggling to put food on the table. You have rising gas prices, they're creeping up again. You have rising grocery bills, you have rising rents, you have rising, everything across the board has increased. On a local level, what one piece of legislation would you offer to help the taxpayers out, if anything?
One of the very first thing is I would author a bill to abolish the local gas tax. And whenever I was going to city council meetings, I spoke up against it because before the gas prices got really bad or even really went up at all, they doubled our gas tax they doubled it from 6 cents to 12 cents with a permanent rollover for an extended amount of time. And I spoke up against it. I was like, look, you're hurting the poorest people in Jacksonville with this regressive tax. That's what a gas tax is, because it really hurts poorest among us, the people that drive long distances to get to work. You know what I mean? They don't have they don't have an electric vehicle or a Tesla or whatever. And for me, like I live on the north side of Jacksonville, we're not as dense as some of the more well-to-do areas of Jacksonville. I drive 30 minutes to work, and then 30 minutes to downtown if I get elected, I got to go to city council. You know what I mean? There are areas in Jacksonville, and that doubling of the gas tax, 80, I think, no, 40% of it went to building a greenway bike path that only benefits 3 of the districts in Jacksonville out of the 14. And it went to like expanding the autonomous vehicle that runs downtown, which no one even uses. So they doubled our gas tax for all of Jacksonville to specifically help 3 or 4 districts in Jacksonville. So I would pass a bill to abolish the gas tax.
And the final one is kind of a federal issue, but I'm just curious about how the libertarian slash you take it. And that is because I think I know what you're going to say, but I'm not 1,000% sure. So, of course, you know that the Supreme Court recently decided that Roe v. Wade was a state issue and not a federal issue. Is the Libertarian Party pro that ruling or against that ruling? And you can talk about
So
your own stance also.
the Libertarian Party is split on that issue. Some think that taking some power away from the federal government and decentralizing power to as local a level as possible is the best for people. And what that means is, like, if you live in a progressive city, it won't be outlawed, but if you live in a conservative town, it might be. But that doesn't mean you can't cross boundaries and, county or state lines for the treatment that you seek. My stance is that I believe in full bodily autonomy, even though me personally, I'm a Christian and me personally, I'm pro-life. I don't think the government has the right to be involved in your medical privacy. Now, that means vaccines. That means prenatal care, postnatal care, end of life care. I don't think the government should have access to your private medical information.
Yeah,
And but
yeah.
also where we might disagree, I am also opposed to taxpayer dollars paying for abortion. So that's where it's like,
Well,
I don't.
we do have the Hyde Amendment right now that prevents the federal government from paying for abortions.
Yeah, but
So,
I would
yeah.
also want to limit like and I don't know if it's ever happened, but under me it'd be a no vote if, for example, a Planned Parenthood applied for a taxpayer funded grant, for example,
Oh, okay,
because
I understand what you mean now.
I would be a no vote if taxpayer dollars were going to it. Now I'm making that as local as possible, and I'm one vote out of 19. But that's how I would vote because I don't want the government involved, but I don't want them in your pocketbook either. So
Understand. So, and I said I had 3 issues, but I'll take that back because I have 4. Um, and I've never brought this one up with anyone, so I'm really curious about this question. Is coming from a sense of diversity. When I look at the Libertarian Party or any third party, minus the Greens, I don't see a lot of people that look like me at all. What do you think? And it may not be true in your area or of the Libertarian Party as a whole, but does the party value diversity, and what steps does the party take, if any, to say, you're a person of color, definitely consider running as a libertarian instead of a Republican or a Democrat?
so this might be a really long answer, but I want to differentiate here locally. I think we are very diverse. One of the 3 libertarians running here in Jacksonville is black, Ronald Tracy Robinson. He's running in District 8, which has the largest percentage of African Americans in that district out of all of the districts in Jacksonville. So, and that I think that is a good thing for us because he is able to reach the type of community that I wouldn't be able to reach. I could go out there, but I don't know that the message would be as received if I was delivering it as opposed to with him delivering it. And I encourage you to look him up and have him come on your podcast as well.
Now say
He's
his name again so I can remember.
Ronald Tracy Robinson, Robison. He's running for District 8 in Jacksonville. So one of the 3, so 33% of our local candidates doesn't necessarily look like you, but is African American. Now in Florida we're unique because we do have a lot of our activity within the Libertarian Party is in South Florida, and our candidate for governor is, I believe, he's of Hispanic background.
Yep.
We have a little bit of diversity because of that, and I do think a lot of like the people with Cuban ancestry do value the idea of liberty. So that is important. But I do agree that we need more outreach. So if you're on my Facebook page right now, I posted a picture of me and Spike Cohen, who was the vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, and it was Supreme from Wu-Tang Clan shaking hands at the Liberty Convention, like LibertyCon 2022. Like that's what we really do need is more connections on a national level to the minority community. And I do think the message of liberty, if anyone understands the importance of liberty and their civil justice, it would be the minority community. And I'm hoping that we do more to reach out to people that look like you. There are people within the party and libertarian philosophies, but like Maj Toure, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He lives in Philadelphia, and he actually teaches the people in his community, like downtown Philadelphia, teaches people the importance of firearm safety and first aid care. And he has an organization called Black Guns Matter, and he thinks it's important for the African American community to be armed so that they can protect both their lives and their civil rights. So it's important, and I hope that we continue to do more to reach
I
people that don't look like me.
Well, I definitely wanted to ask that question because I watched a convention. I don't know how old it was, but I'm like, okay, because I noticed myself looking for that because if I
Yeah,
don't see it, I'm like, okay, you're talking it, but I don't see it. If I don't see it reflected, it's like,
yeah.
okay, that's going to be really hard for me as a black person to
Well,
identify to get it because I'm hearing
yeah,
people say what I thought was the right things, and some of them I just literally disagree with. But that's neither here nor there. But I'm like,
yeah,
okay, I'm not seeing, and not that I see it in the Republican Party. I never,
yeah,
I could literally name maybe two black Republicans total, like total.
yeah.
There's none in my state, um, at all that I could even name, and I can only name two nationally, maybe three.
In our local race, and I could be wrong, but I think there's one black Republican running for city council. We have now all of our candidates for sheriff were African American black. They were, I can't remember, I think it was one Republican and four Democrats, and it went to now. It's going to be the general election because it's a special election. It's one Republican versus one Democrat. The Republicans male, Democrats female. So I'm trying to think. Registered Republicans in local off or running for election. I think we have five city council members that are African American, but all of them would not vote the way I would. And not just all of them that are black, but all of them up on city council. Regardless of race. You know what I mean? So, but I do think, like, especially if we can get people in the minority community to just leave the two-party system, I think that would send a shockwave. We just got to convince them that. And I had this idea too, where if you found one Republican and one Democrat that agreed, I don't like either of these candidates, and then convince those two individual people, like they make a handshake, say, we're going to vote third party. We promise we're not going to vote Republican or Democrat. That could be a way to do it. Like, and then they go find the best third party option that they can. You know what I mean?
I've talked about on this show several times how people tend to say, "Oh, well, they're just alike," but when you bring up voting third party, it's like, "Oh no, well, it's just a vote for opposite
Exactly.
party." I'm like, "No," but that's part of the reason I did this show is to get people to start thinking, "Hey, expand your mind. If you're dissatisfied with the Republicans, there's always a third option. It's always out there. You just have to make the decision to do it." And
Yeah.
I
And
do want to go
we
ahead.
need more third party candidates running, and running in local elections, I think, really does make a difference. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. And these last set of questions, and again, I'm trying to find a pen so I can write down the name of the person that you gave because I promise once I get off this interview, I'm going to be like, he said who. So could you email me that name,
yeah,
please?
yeah,
Thank you. That way
I'll
I
email.
know to remember it. Because
Yeah.
I'll watch it. Because I don't like to go back and watch myself because I'm always like, oh, why did I look like that? Why do I talk like that? Why did I do that? I know I should to make my viewership go up, but it's a hard thing. I can listen to myself, but I can't watch myself for some reason. Um,
Yeah.
but I wanted to talk about um, before I have you give out your social media contacts. What one thing in this campaign? Okay, let me rephrase this question. In terms of your campaign, what is the one thing that you have that you are glad that you had once you decided to run?
Like an experience, or are you
An
just saying?
experience, a feeling, a conversation, something that
I've
you
made a
had
lot
that
of
you.
I made a lot of, I think, lifelong friends and connections, and had real conversations with real people. Even like I'll knock on the door of someone. Happened a couple weeks ago. And they were a registered Democrat, and I told them my platform, and then they asked me one question like, are you going to? How do you feel about selling JA? And I said that was corrupt, and I would definitely vote no if it ever came up with. That's our electric authority here, our electric company. It's like community owned or whatever. It's not privatized, and I totally agree that or disagreed with selling it the way that they would have done it, and I would vote no on selling it. But just like whenever I was able to answer those questions honest to someone who probably when I knock on their door think and or hear me speak because I'm Southern think that we're going to disagree, but then they hear what I really stand for, like just having those real engagements with people, real conversations like this, knowing that we probably disagree on some things, and just relationships with people here on the local level that even after this election will be more important than whether I win or lose.
And what is the one thing that you lack in terms of your campaign that you wish you had?
Funding.
That has
But
been the answer for every single candidate. I have not had a candidate say anything else different.
and also resources, but what I mean is like the Libertarian Party locally, we've never ran three candidates at once. It's kind of crazy the amount of funding major party candidates get. I don't know. I bet mine by the end of it will have over $100,000 for the one of them in my district at least. So that you got to think if there's three of them, probably two will have over 100,000. The other one will probably get close to 50, and I'll probably hopefully be around 20. But funding and resources, and I'm having I can't remember the term, but blueprints, I guess, for how to run a successful campaign. So now after this, I will hopefully be able to provide this knowledge to other local candidates here in Jacksonville that decide to run as libertarians. And like I said earlier, I'm also willing to reach out to other third parties. Now, I might not endorse a green candidate if they're running against a libertarian, and but I don't mind helping them try to help them at least learn how to run a campaign and help out and get involved. So
And that
we,
keep your
we don't
eyes
have
open.
that currently.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good. I'm saying we don't have that currently, those blueprints for how to run campaigns in the third party system.
We don't, and that's what we kind of talked about at the end of Duopoly Forum, the one that I tried to get as many parties as possible, but that's kind of like our next step to do. But that's a work in progress. That's the word I'm looking for. But lastly, talk about where, because I didn't even realize you had a Facebook page. Where can people find you at if they want to connect to your campaign and learn more about you and financially support you if they want to?
So you can find my links to social media at my website, ericparker4jax.com, FORJAX.com.
Okay, so it is an X. Okay.
And that'll have my links to all my social media, but on Facebook, which is where I'm most active just because it's easier to comment unless they like down throttle or block my comments. But it's easier for me to engage on Facebook. But that's Eric Parker for Jacksonville City Council, District 2. If you type in Eric Parker for Jacksonville, you'll probably see something along those lines. My Twitter is EricP904. My Instagram for the campaign is, and I'm not very active on there, but still it's Eric Parker for Jacksonville City Council D2 with a bunch of underscores in between it. So it's kind of difficult, but if you type it into Google, it should pop up. And the links on my website will take you to all of those.
Great. So I want to thank you so much for coming on. I learned a lot about in terms of the Libertarian Party. Usually I wouldn't lean most of my questions that way, but because I'm like, well, I don't really know as much as I think I do. So I thought, okay, I have a Libertarian on, I'll ask him. But I definitely want to thank you for your time. To the audience that is watching, if you happen to watch this podcast later, please remember to comment, subscribe, subscribe. I'm literally 14 away from 100. When I'm at 100, YouTube is going to send me a nice little email with balloons all over it. I want to get that email. I'm desperate for my 100 subscribers, so please subscribe, comment on this podcast, share it. I will see you all next week, hopefully with a guest. I haven't heard from my guest yet, but if not, I'll be here by myself. It'll be fine, and we'll see you all later. Have a great evening.